Good morning. Uh, yeah, I have a few Cycnoches that are blooming at the moment, and luckily I have some male and female flowers. So the idea is to pollinate some of them, and hopefully I can get some Cycnoches germinating here in the trees around my house. It's a genera that's generally not too common, I find. Catasetum and Marmotus are far more common and both seem to be doing well germinating around my house. So I'm hoping the same will apply for Cycnoches. But here we have a Cycnoches ventricosum, I think it is. It's a female flower. As you can tell, the neck is a little bit shorter and stouter. And yeah, I'm going to pollinate it with a Cycnoches warscewiczii, which is has male flowers, and hopefully it'll work out well. So yeah, this ended up opening up about yesterday, and the female flower over there opened up this morning. And yeah, warscewiczii is a bigger species. The flowers are larger, and the overall size of the plant too. Um, yeah, so let's try and get the pollen collected from them. I assume it'll be pretty similar to getting the pollen from a catasetum, that it's like a trigger that once you touch it, it should just kind of pop out of there. Um, yeah, let's see what happens. Okay, let's see if we can get the pollens out of these flowers. Gonna use a bamboo skewer just to kind of trigger the pollen to pop out of there. It should be, if you touch it just right, should just kind of pop. There we go. It popped right out of there. And there's a little pad of like white sticky glue that normally would stick to the back of a bee. I'm gonna stick the glue to the skewer just to kind of hold on to it. Now there's a little cap over the pollen area, or whatever the two little pollen packs are that holds on the tip of it. Um, Trying to get it off. It's being a little bit resistant. Um, I'll be back in a second. Give me a chance to get that off. That was a little bit more resistant than I was expecting it to be. I ended up just putting it aside for the moment and trying again. In retrospect, it's probably a protective measure against self-pollination. Later on, I collected one and I just let it dry out in the sun for about an hour, and the cap just kind of popped off all on its own. But meanwhile, here I'm gonna show the second attempt that I made at collecting the pollen. I went back and got a pair of tweezers to help me get it off. Again, just kind of touch the tip of the skewer to the right spot there, right below where the pollen is, and there it goes. There pops off, and gets stuck, wraps around that tip of the tweezers or the skewer, and then yeah, glue it to the tip of a different skewer just to make handling it easier. And yeah, first I tried getting it off here a, with the other skewer, but that wasn't working out well. So um, yeah, after messing around with that for a little bit and it not working out for me, I went and got the tweezers, and they worked out a little bit better. But one of the pollen packets was still inside the cap, but one of them remained at the end of the whatever that's called. But yeah, at the end of that little thing with the sticky pad on it. And so yeah, we're gonna take that pollen and go over to the female flower and stick that in there. Now, strangely enough, this female flower and another one that I have currently blooming, a Cycnoches egertonium, Both had pollen caps with what looked like to be normal, somewhat smaller, but still healthy looking pollen grains in it. Now, I don't know if that's normal for Cycnoches female flowers to also produce pollen, but I do know that it occasionally happens with catasetums that you can get perfect flowers that are both female and male, but it's fairly rare. Now, to get back to actually pollinating the flower, I got the pollinia grabbed by the caudicle underneath it, and I'm slipping that into a little groove in the column that seems like it's made especially just for stripping off the pollen. Now, you might have noticed that as I was pollinating it, the anther cap fell off with the pollen in it, but I recovered those. Now here you can see the two grooves on either side of the anther that are in front of the stigma, which is the sticky bit that where the pollen needs to go for the flower to get pollinated. And that's just in general on most orchids that, yeah, the little sticky bit at the end of the column, that's where the pollen needs to go for a successful pollination. Okay, now to get to my catasetum germination project here on the wood piles, get an update on what's happening with them. Actually, a lot more have been germinating. The weather's been fairly wet, so I think that helped quite a bit. Here's some logs that I actually cut the ends off of because there were so many germinating in them, so that I can eventually move them into my growing area. And yeah, here's another one where you can see the roots are growing really nicely. Um, Out of the top, there's a few new ones coming out, which is really cool. It's Here's also another one again with some really nice root development. Overall, there's been quite a few that have been new ones that have been popping out, which is really kind of interesting to me. I'm kind of excited to see what I get out of this. I'm hoping that quite a few of them should be interesting hybrids, uh, just because I haven't really been allowing any seeds to develop besides crosses that I chose to make happen. But besides that, I actually have quite a few that look like they're not from the Catasetum family that are germinating, which is also really kind of interesting. Looks like there's a lot of gongoras and some like epidendrums uh, germinating. I also opened up the canopy a little bit, got rid of some branches to let some more light in, just because it was so shady that I think it was actually slowing down the growth. It just wasn't enough light. I have little orchids popping up all over these logs, which will probably end up becoming a little of a bit of a problem to figure out where I'm going to put them all once they need to be separated. The idea is that hopefully I can leave them on these logs. At least the mormoras should bloom, some of them at least in the first year, which is what I'm hoping. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy with what's been going on with the germination. There's another one that's doing pretty well. And next with a little anole, if that's interesting to any of you. Um, but yeah, that one is actually doing really well. Uh, it's two next to each other. Those are two individuals. Uh, these are ones that have already been growing for it's a few months now, and you can definitely tell where there's a lot of them together, it tends to slow them down. It's like they're probably competing for resources, and it's why I put it. You can see a few little pellets of Nutricoat, like a slow release fertilizer that I put in some spots just to kind of maybe help them develop a little bit better in areas where there's more than just one or two. But yeah, that's another interesting looking one. That looks like it's not even from Catasetum family. Here in the shade of the leaf of the bigger one, you can see that a small one germinated. It's actually got quite a lot of roots going for such a small plant. Um, Here's some more older plants that I put in here a few years ago. A lot of them have already bloomed once. This here is a Galliandra. It's blooming. It is in its second year, and yeah, you can see it's a lot bigger than it was the year before. The previous year's pseudobulb is a lot smaller. And here you can see an unusual flower bud from a Catasetum maculatum. It's unusual because the two lower flower buds are female flowers, and the top one is a male one. You can see it's pointier, whereas the female ones are kind of have this rounded nub at the bottom. And here's a Mordis that germinated last year, and you can see that the new bulb is going to be a lot bigger than the old one. The old one was like maybe an inch or inch and a half long, whereas the new one is going to be, I'd say, 5 to 6 inches long before the end of the year. And I'll finish off the video with a few more shots of some orchids that germinated on these live uh, posts, and maybe a few pictures of some things that have been blooming around my garden in the last few months or weeks.